Now we started off by saying that functions are usually fairly simple pieces of code. They're not too long generally. Your purpose is to get them to start and stop as quickly as possible, do their work, and then move on. But what if you have a use case of needing more complex functions? How can you design your function within Azure to basically work in a more complex state? Well, let's look at that. There's this concept called durable functions. If we go into, let's assume you have a function app that's been created. If you go into the templates in detail, we can scroll down a little bit and we can see this section on durable functions. You've got a starter that will basically execute an orchestrator when it receives a trigger. You have the orchestrator, which is the function that invokes the other functions. It's the traffic cop. It's the one that basically guides the task from start to finish. And then you got the individual tasks. So this is very much like a logic app, and in fact you might be able to use a logic app instead of a durable function. But let's use a durable function. So we'll start with the starter, and as soon as I choose the starter, it says that I don't have the function, the extension installed for durable. So I'm going to say okay. Let's install the durable extensions. It could take up to 2 minutes, so we'll let that run. So the extension was successfully installed. So remember, we're going to create 3 functions here. Now we're going to have the starter function, so I'm going to call this starter function. This is the function that takes an HTTP trigger and should be able to be used to call the orchestrator in an asynchronous way. So we can see here that actually if I go into the function.json, we can see that it's an HTTP trigger that's inbound. So that's the starter, and it actually binds to an orchestration client as well. So go back to there. Now, at the same time, so the function name gets passed in as a parameter here. So at the same time, let's create another function. And this time we're going to create the orchestrator. So this is the one that's going to do the work of, so my orchestrator, don't know if I'm spelling it correctly, but this is the one that's going to do the work of calling the child functions. Now we can see in this demo code that Microsoft gives us that it's actually, it's got an activity, and it's going to be calling the hello activity with 3 parameters: Tokyo, Seattle, and London. So if we had created an activity function named hello, then this orchestrator is going to be calling it 3 times. So let's create the activity function. So we'll scroll down to the activity function. Now it's calling it hello1. Let's call it worker. We can call these things whatever we want, obviously. So this worker, the demo code, just returns back hello with the variable that's been passed in. So let's go back. That's the worker function. Let's go back to the orchestrator function. And instead of it being called hello, we actually called ours worker. Okay? And we can say Bob, Harry, and Dick. Okay, Bob, Dick, and Harry. I don't know if young people know what Bob, Dick, and Harry is, but that's what we'll pass in as the 3 names. And if we go into the starter function, then again, the starter function gets passed in as a parameter. Okay, so if we scroll over to the test tab here, then we see function name is being passed as a value. So it's actually my orchestrator. as the value. So now if I ran this starter function, I would expect it to execute the orchestrator, and the orchestrator executes the worker function 3 times. So I go down here and I click run. Now it's going to run. We can go back to the log and we can see that it's actually executing the starter function, started orchestration, and the starter function ends. Now this is actually continuing on. I'm going to look at the output of this here. Sorry, copy that. And so the output of our starter function has output this JSON output, and one of the items here is status query. So if I copy this into a new browser window, we can see that the runtime is already completed, and it said hello Bob, hello Dick, hello Harry. And so that is what we were expecting to happen. So what we've got is an asynchronous function that kicks off and calls other functions along the way. You can make this as complicated as you want, but by having functions calling other functions in an asynchronous way, you can then go to this URL, check the status. Maybe this thing takes a long time to run, and so we would see it in progress, etc. But durable functions are a way to create complex chains of functions that are more than just the simple functions that you would expect in this embedded line of code. Now you should take a look at Microsoft has a web page here dealing with durable functions, because there's certain design patterns. Okay, there's chaining where function A calls function B, calls function C, calls function D. That fan out, fan in, where you've got a function that calls 3 other functions, but then those 3 other functions return a result to a single function, and it continues on, etc., etc. So there's different patterns for application design for durable functions. So I recommend that you go learn all of these patterns individually, when you're dealing with durable functions. But creating them in the portal is actually pretty easy. You just go and use the templates that they provide, and you can see here it executes in asynchronous fashion, and that in that way can be a lot more complex than just the simple functions that we've been dealing with.